So the idea comes from a combination of several factors and pieces and things. And one of the pieces of the puzzle is the Open Dhamma Foundation. That I really like what Tucker is doing there, and you told me a bit about it from the perspective of the transportation. Oh, and I also talked with Dan Ingram about this, and he agrees that this would be something. So basically, the Open Dhamma Foundation supports students in two ways. One is through transportation, and then the other one is what I understand direct payment to the retreat centers for the student going to the retreat. Okay. You do know that this is all the Western business model. This is, while the scholarships are a really, really good idea to help the students, the position that I would like to introduce to you is that an organization, either a part of Open Dhamma Foundation or a new foundation that someone else would start, takes a different position. Rather than supporting the students, you would be supporting the teachers directly. Now, here's where we're looking at this, is that doing this is going to change it out of the Western business model into the Asian, more cooperative model, so that we work together as friends. Now, one thing that I've seen, and I think that you can see the indication of it, is that the interest in the Dhamma is growing. It's growing fast. There's a number of factors that are involved with that. It hasn't quite met critical mass yet, but it's building towards that. And in that regard, there's a number of young people who want to teach the Dhamma. And that the more Dhamma teachers that we have, then the better. And so I think that we can develop a model that kind of operates the way that the models do in Asia, to where an example would be a teaching monk. A monk who is teaching lay people and other monks never charges any money at all. In fact, the monks don't have much of anything to do with money. And that the retreat centers that are associated with the Watch here in Thailand don't charge. That everything is done by Dhamma. And that certainly putting a price on it puts it back into the business model. If the teachers are using a business model, then that subliminally is what they're teaching their students. But if they work on a Dhamma model, now they're teaching the students generosity. If the teacher is opening his heart to teach, then the students will open their hearts to give. But if it's a business deal, then that business deal remains a business deal in the sense that there's always a buyer and a seller. As opposed to in the Dhamma model, they become friends. Just like our relationship. Money would, if you were paying me money, that would destroy our relationship. And so, or at least not destroy it, but put it in a different world or a different footing. I might even have to be required to be more careful about what I say. But there's another side of this that Robert here in Thailand that I have discussed is that not only do we need more teachers, but there's going to be the need for more facilities, more meditation retreat centers, and that we need to find a way of moving them out of the model that they are in of a business model into a more Asian model. Well, now, the easiest way to do that is take advantage of all of the various wats and temples, like in the United States. Every major city that I know of, will have at least one Asian lot from one of the countries. They'll either be Sri Lankan or Burmese, which is not very many of those. But the Lao, the Cambodian, the Thai, and the Vietnamese, there's a lot of them all over. These places all have more or less the door closed. The door is closed in the following way. One is that the language barrier, that monks who come over generally don't learn English language very well. And the only people who know language are just going to be Asians who support that temple. And they're temple supporters, but they're not Dhamma teachers. That's not their business. Also, when there's any advertisements, the advertisements are done in the Asian language so that the Westerners don't know much about it, even if it's a website. The Thai Watts generally have a website that's in Thai language. So they're not doing really an outreach program. So what I would like to see is sort of a method for the Dhamma teachers who wanted to get into teaching the Dhamma to get affiliated with these various temples. Hundreds of them in the United States. I know because I've been to at least 50 of them personally myself over the years. And Robert's come up with a really good idea about that. That he and I both know publishers in Taiwan and in Bangkok who publish Dhamma books for a very, very reasonable price. If we could bring a bulk shipment of Dhamma books into the United States and deliver them to someone who's going to be a caretaker, then that caretaker could dole 15 or 20 books out to these Dhamma teachers, and that would then be their introduction to the various temples. They would go in and give a whole bookshelf full of books as a gift to the temple, with the idea that then the temple is going to be giving these books away. And so coming into the temple and giving all of the books to the abbot and then sitting down and sitting on the floor for a day or two is going to make a lot of bogey points. Eventually, these teachers would be able to have then that facility to teach Dhamma, say 1 night a week. Maybe it works into weekends and eventually into real retreats. The Asians would very much like this. I know they would like to find a way, but that door is closed. So getting the foot in the door would be this group of books that the students could, or the teachers would be able to donate. That would be also the people who were all Westerners who wandered into that temple then would be given gifts of these books, and these the Dhamma teachers could write their name in the book. Like this book was donated by Joe Brown. Here's my email. If you're interested in the Dhamma, give me a call, you see. And so it would be also a kind of a form of advertisement. So we need to get the students, we need to get the Dhamma teachers organized, because right now the model is a business model, which means that the teachers want to keep their students. They want to keep them as students, and they want to keep them paying, which means then that they're not going to be very cooperative with other Dhamma teachers. They want them to stay at their Dhamma center rather than going around. But Dhamma teachers that teach for Dhamma don't mind that so much. In fact, we would recommend, well, why don't you go to see that teacher, or why don't you go over there? I've had many teachers in not only just all my life, dozens and dozens of them, but I've also had a few Dhamma teachers. And so I think that it's a good idea for us to have more than just one teacher. The idea of having a guru, I think, is not the right way of dispensing the Dhamma. That the Dhamma is actually spread through friendship. And so if we can help America change that model, we could actually get out of the model that Western Buddhism has got and get into a model that is much more conducive to the way that Buddhism has always been dispensed, and that is through generosity.
So you're saying that the teachers would get affiliations with these different monasteries that are already established in the area. So how do the teachers, how are they able to eat? Where's the money coming from for them?
Well, if there is an organization that has supporters who know about this, there are people who want to give dana, and this would be a place to do it. It could be organized and run through the organization, very similar, in fact, to you might even use the same web pages with some slight changes that the Open Dhamma Foundation is using, except that instead of contacting and working to give scholarships to students, they would be giving scholarships to the teachers.
Okay.
And that there's a number of us who would be willing to put in. I'm willing to put in some money. I'll give some seed money for this.
So then the student, who's actually going on retreat, say at one of these centers with one of these teachers, is not necessarily giving dana to the teacher. Is that accurate?
No, that frees up. See, what I want to do is I want to free it up for the teachers to feel that they've got a base or a foundation so that they can start teaching for dana, so that they can teach then their students to be generous, so that the students then who, instead of getting a scholarship from the Open Dhamma Foundation to pay the teacher and then the business deal is done, I'm looking at it from the sense that, no, we support the teachers from the beginning so that they then can feel comfortable that they can start teaching by dana, and then they can teach their students generosity, so that now the students will start supporting this teacher and get it into a much more donation and dana-oriented mentality rather than charging money for it mentality. Generally, when you pay for something that you're charged money for, once you pay the fee and get the item, the transaction is finished. But in dana, it's continuous transaction, only it's not a money transaction in most cases, but it is, in fact, friendship, doing things together, helping each other out. An example would be many teachers think that they're absolutely on their own and have to do everything for themselves. That's very much the American style, the rugged individualist kind of mentality, where within an organization like this, the teachers could learn about each other and then decide to teach together.
Mm-hmm.
And be friends and teach, so that their responsibilities of teaching is not so strenuous for them.
Mm-hmm.
That would also, with bringing teachers in who are dedicated to the Dhamma, it doesn't really matter what tradition they come from or what they have learned, because the students will have an opportunity to hear more teachers and get a more full understanding of the Dhamma than they can through just one teacher's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And so another thing which is important in that regard is that in order to be a Dhamma teacher, you really have to have some dedication to it. You really think that the Dhamma is so important and is more important than any other kind of way to live. And this is an important quality to it. In fact, that dedication to the path is very much a part of why it is traditional that meditation teachers should be Sotapan. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa points out that no, maybe not the full fruit of Sotapan, but at least they would come to the position of knowing Paticca Samuppada and really understanding how their own mind works, because that's the level where in dedication, when you really see that this teaching of the Buddha is in fact liberating. Why? Because you've been practicing, you can see it, you know that it's working. And so then the students want to become a Dhamma teacher. But now it's a daunting problem. How can they transition out of an employee in a business that's a student of Dhamma into becoming a Dhamma teacher? Where did their credentials come from? Well, if we had an organization of Dhamma teachers, then when people would join the organization, that would give them credentials. It would give them a bottom line. It would give them a base and a set of cooperations. So in order to get all of this stuff going, we need a few volunteers. Robert's going to take care of contacting the publishers, and he and I can figure out what books that we want to, mostly Bhikkhu Buddhadasa books, to distribute. But one thing, we need a website. We need someone who can do a website. We need someone to populate that website with data. And so that's the second job of someone who can do a literature research. One of the things that Robert would like to see is there is a website called BIA, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa or Buddhadasa Itapanyo Archives, and it is rich, but it's rich with Thai language. Meanwhile, the English language stuff of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is just all over the place, but there's no one Western website that's dedicated to bringing together all of his stuff from all over the web. So we need someone who can go out looking for all of that kind of data on the web to put it on this website. Another thing is a list of Dhamma centers, and in fact, Daniel Ingram has been collecting that kind of data for quite a while, and he would like to have that data shared so that he can collect it and get more, and we can borrow what he's got also. And so we could use someone who would do an, let us say, whatever research both on and off the internet to get a list of as many different Asian Watts in the United States as we can come up with, and maybe just a little bit of a blurb about each one of them, so that we've got a long list of Asian Watts, and that getting the foot in the door through the donation of the book, so that the Westerners would start to feel better. Here's what will happen, is that the Asians are shy about the culture and about the language. But if one Westerner starts to attend and becomes part of the organization and friendly, then the Asians themselves will push this Westerner who speaks English into teaching the Dhamma to the Westerners. They will open their doors to it. This is the way to open the door. I know I've seen that door open many, many different times, but not enough. And no one's got the idea of, let's intentionally go out and start opening these Asian doors to get the Westerners in there so that they can get that Asian influence. And one of the main Asian influences, let's do this by dana, by generosity, rather than by charging money. And so having a whole bookshelf full of books to give away freely to the Westerners would be a part of that generosity mentality.
Yeah, so there is a Vietnamese temple that I've been to a few times. It's right outside Atlanta, but it's really nice. Like they do a little Dhamma talk. So once a month, there's a nun who gives a little Dhamma talk, and there's group meditation and then walking meditation, and it's really nice, and they don't ask for anything. In fact, I didn't even know, like, because everything's in Vietnamese, I didn't even know if, like, there was no place for me to even give money if I wanted to. They weren't asking for any of that. And it's really nice. And they have a meal that they do. And I asked them whether or not I could go there more regularly. And they said that that's just a once a month thing that they do. They said I could try to go to on Sunday. They said that they do some kind of like a service, there's chanting or something. They said it's all in Vietnamese, but they said I could go if I wanted to go, but I just wouldn't understand anything.
Right. So you've actually then experienced precisely what I'm talking about. They really would like to have someone in English that was associated with their Vihar. But in Atlanta, you'd be surprised. I know of one Cambodian and 3 Lao temples in Atlanta. There's also a Thai temple that I've never been to before. And I haven't been to the Vietnamese temple that you're talking about. So already now I know of in Atlanta, that's 5 different facilities. Certainly one of them, especially the one that has the boat, they've got enough sleeping quarters to run retreats.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to tell you to get there. All I know is that we passed Stone Mountain. It's somewhere in the vicinity of Stone Mountain, and behind it. It's behind the mountain someplace over in there. It's off of the freeway that goes past Stone Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Atlanta's got at least 5 different watts. Houston's got 3 that I know of. Dallas has got, I know of 3 different Lao watts in Dallas, but I'm sure that there are others. There's even a Lao watt in Amarillo.
Mm-hmm.
A number of them in Florida. And so this is the idea that if the new generation of Dhamma teachers feel like that they're on their own, then it's going to be harder for them to kind of make the mental change in their mind that they actually are going to sort of dedicate their lives to the Dhamma. Well, that's in fact what Sotapan really is all about. It's the dedication to the Dhamma. That's the stream enterer, is the one who enters the stream fully with the intention, rather than saying, well, I'm going to dabble in it. I'm going to put a toe in the stream, or I'm going to stick a foot in it, or maybe I'll take a skinny dip or whatever like that, like a 10-day skinny dip. But the real stream entry is when the dedication to it comes. And so there's many of them. I can give you a list of probably 10, and you would put Upali on that list. Timmy Davis in London, and Danny Cox in Bristol. You also have Christopher Kerr. The list just goes on. There's a lot of budding Dhamma teachers that would like to start teaching. Upali is another one. If we can get them a support base, then there would be even more who wants to start teaching the Dhamma. And the more Dhamma teachers we have, the faster the Dhamma will spread. And I think that the world is about ready for it.
So is the idea to start at one locale in the U.S., or do you just want to try it all at once?
Well, it depends upon how many teachers that we can get to join the organization. That would be actually another volunteer's job to sort of round them up, to put the word out. Do you know who's a budding Dhamma teacher who's trying to get in the business of teaching the Dhamma?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want the older generation. We've got an entire older generation that's already stuck in the ways that they're doing things. We're not looking for established Dhamma teachers. We're looking for the guys who want to join.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the Samedos and the Amaros and the Jack Cornfields and the Joseph Goldsteins and the Christopher Titmus and that whole world is the world of the old folks. They were the what I like to call the first generation. And there's going to be a new generation of Dhamma teachers coming up, and that the old generation seems to be broken into two distinct groups. Those that are businessmen, and they're in the business of the Dhamma, and then there's a few monks like Samedo and Amaro and Cantipalo and even Santikaro. Santikaro now, even though he is a layman, he still fits in with that Dhamma only. That's what he's doing at his facility. And so there's a number of old guard that do Dhamma only. And they've already gotten themselves established. They would be welcome to join the organization, but the intention of the organization is to foster new Dhamma teachers.
Mm-hmm. I think that, yeah, so what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me in terms of strategy. I don't know what the reception is among the teachers, but I know that I really enjoyed when I was starting out meditating going to that monastery, and it was really great how welcoming they were. They gave me a free meal, and that was it was really cool. So yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think that yeah, there's a good chance that Dan Ingram could be helpful for this kind of thing, because I've told you that I'm part of this little group of scientists talking to him about some things. And he's retired now, and he's kind of putting all his energy into mostly kind of the science of these things, but I think he's just generally just, trying to do things now. And he's very efficient too.
I just with him just 2 nights ago. Yeah, he's all in.
Yeah, okay, cool.
And so I'm getting up the gumption, I guess, to talk to Tucker about it.
Uh-huh.
Because I think if I can recruit Tucker Peck, that because he's already got enough of the organization built around the Open Dhamma Foundation, that this could be they could give us a real leg up. That I'm not looking for an administrator post. All I'm looking for is to get the idea out, and that if other people want to pursue this idea as a group, then that's the way to do it. That this is not a one-man show.
Yeah.
And they've already got. Here's another thing. If we're going to actually be actively financing Dhamma teachers and giving them support, then we need someone to be in charge of the money and the mechanism of how to give the money out. Well, that's already built into Open Dhamma Center. They already know how to do that. And so this would fit in extremely well, I think, because I'm not asking them to change anything that they're doing now, but rather to add an additional point to it that has helping the teachers rather than helping the students.
Yeah, I know that Upali is very involved in that organization, and I know that Tucker is, and I know that I think I know a couple of the people on there. But have you spoken to any of them, any of the people on the board about it?
No, not yet. This is still an idea in formulation. In fact, talking to you about it is the way to go. If I talk to enough people about it, I'll get the thing well enough organized that I can present it to people who um, would have a stake in it.
Yeah.
And so, no, I haven't. But I'm intending to. I want to talk to Noah about it because Noah's on the board. And I think that Jim Irving would also be on board with it because I know him.
Uh-huh.
But everybody that's associated with Open Dhamma Foundation, I don't know them all. So thanks for telling me about Upali being a part of that.
Yeah.
And, and Dan Ingram has his own set of resources.
Yeah, he's very good at networking and stuff, is what I've realized. He's a good person to work with, I think, in terms of just getting things done. He gets shit done.
So that's the way that I'm looking at it also, is let's do some networking with this intention of organizing the Dhamma teachers, the new generation of Dhamma teachers, so that they have a new business model.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than the business model of the West, let's use the business model of the East. Especially since you've got so many Asians there, in not just in the United States, they're all over Europe too. Not as much because the U.S. took a lot of refugees from the Vietnam era, and so that's why there's so many Lao Wats in the United States. There's also quite a lot of Cambodians, but by far the majority of them are going to be Vietnamese because so many Vietnamese came over.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, so to answer your, well, you didn't ask it directly, but I am interested in this, and I'd be willing to I mean, as you know, at the moment, I don't have tons of time because of the Corona stuff, but I do have some time that I could reach out to some people and that kind of thing. It seems to me that maybe a good strategy forward is just seeing how receptive these different monasteries are, and just try to do a couple like test cases just to reach out and see what happens.
All of that research was done years ago. I know for sure, and you just reiterated it.
But I mean, like as a toward a more formal thing, like what you're talking about, of like a bigger Western presence in their monastery and that kind of thing, rather than just some random stragglers coming through, you know?
Right. Okay. But you as you as a straggler passing through that Wat, they gave you an invitation to come back.
Yeah.
Okay. What the Westerners don't know is what a valuable resource these Wats were or are. That it took a position that I was in to visit a lot of Asian Wats as a Western monk, or as a monk, and therefore was accepted right into to the temples. But that I spoke English made me a really, really valuable thing. In fact, they wanted me to come to Atlanta so that I could teach there. That I did give several Dhamma talks in English at the Lao temples there in Atlanta. They would really like that. The Asians would really, really like it, but they don't feel like that they've got the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And the language is a big barrier. But if they have Dhamma people, you see, you just random straggler shows up. Imagine that if you'd shown up with a collection of 25 books to be given away, Dhamma books.
Uh-huh.
They would really like that. They would really appreciate that you were enough involved that you're willing to donate to the Wat a valuable thing then that they can give out.
Is the Is the Vietnamese one going to want a Vietnamese book and the Chinese one going to, I mean, is it going to be?
Already got their Vietnamese books.
But I mean, I imagine that there's slight differences in certain aspects of the teaching. And so they might not want a different country's. I don't know if this is the case.
The by and large, the Buddhists do not, from Asia, do not, how to say it, they're unlike the Christians. 40,000 sects of Christianity in the United States. Do you know how many sects there are of Buddhism in Thailand?
One? I don't know.
Actually, there are 3. But the distinctions of them are so small that you could be in one of those 3 Watts or one of those 3 sects, and then go visit another sect. And the other sect that you went to wouldn't even bother to ask you where you came from. That the intersection between the Dhamma and the Mahanakai was only because of historical circumstances. And so we know which Watts are which. In fact, if the Watt has the word Nalam at the end of it, that word Islam is actually it's the Chinese pronunciation of Ram or Rama or royalty. So it means Watsapatuna Alam means that this was a temple that was founded by the king of Thailand to try to bring the Dhamma and the real teachings of the Buddha back to the various village Watts that have been, let us say, overly magicalized so that they have deteriorated into superstition. That happened about, during the late 1880s is when that happened. And so even though the Dhamma only have their temples in major and big cities, still the Mahanakai, the local temples, have been greatly improved. And so I stayed at Dhamma temples when I was in Bangkok. A Dhamma temple is Wat Mahatat, which is in fact all of the Wats that are associated with the royal palace are all Dhamma temples. So Mahasamsak was trained as a chanter in the Dhamma temple at Wat Po, but that distinction doesn't exist in Cambodia. And so there's not that deterioration and breaking apart and having, how to say it, maybe the best way to say it is this, that if you have a magical story that you're telling, then every little version of that magical story can cause conflict. So that my version of the magical story and your magical version of the story is enough for us to break apart, and you go form your church and I'll go form mine. But truth is much smaller than magical stories. You can have magical stories about anything. An example of that would be, how old are you?
34.
All right. If you lied to me, what would you say? How old are you?
I don't, what do I get from lying to you?
You're getting the point that you can lie to me and give me many, many different answers. But the truth is small. I can tell you I'm 300. I can tell you I'm 10,000. I can tell you I'm -1. I can just go all over the map. How many different numbers do you have is how many different lies we can tell. But the truth is 34. Okay? So that's what happens with Christianity is that it's not founded in truth. It's founded upon a magical story. And because of that, it tends to splinter up with various different denominations, where Buddhism is much more unified. A really easy example of that is the Dalai Lama has been to Wat Suan Mok. The Tibetan monks, he brought Tibetan monks, and Tibetan monks are at Wat Suan Mok on a fairly regular basis. You know, because they got weird robes. But other than that, there is not that disunity. And so if you brought Bhikkhu Buddhadasa books to a Vietnamese temple, they would be very happy with that.
Yeah, so the nun who originally organized it, I think I have her email address too, so I could reach out to her.
Excellent. That would be good. Ask her if she would like a donation of books, because Robert and I are thinking about, let's get our first order, and maybe we'll send FOB to you.
Yeah. Sounds good. Maybe once the lockdown stops, which in Georgia might be on Friday.
And again and again and again.
Yeah. I have a couple of Dhamma questions. I have to go soon because of
for Dhamma right now. So we finished our little talk about Dhamma teachers.
Yeah. So yeah, so I mean, we've talked before about this. So I said that typically what I do meditation wise is typically like a TMI style thing. Last time we talked, you mentioned an approach that, and I just want to make sure I understand the instructions right, involving a mantra, which is Buddho. And I just wanted to understand how that fits in with normal breath meditation, whether you do that only after you have a sufficiently high concentration, or if you can do that from the beginning. Is there a focus on the words themselves? Is it on the sound? Is it on the breath still? So that's my question.
Okay. Without using the word concentration.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
We can think of it this way, is that the student is going to systematically be able to control his mind. And that the first thing that we do is that we give the student the anchor of, if the mind wanders away from the breath, come back to the breath. So that we get to focus now off of just letting the mind go all over the place, that we're beginning to make a distinction. Okay. After the student gets his mind on the breath, the mind will still have noise, junk thoughts, background noise, some of them call it. They can continue to watch the breath, but that the mind continues to wander. So now we're going to kind of let it continue to wander, but we're going to do a bit of corral work. In other words, we're going to let the horse wander, but we're not going to let him wander everywhere. We're going to create a pasture for the horse. Not going to put him in the barn yet, but we're going to put him into a pasture. And so we put boundaries there. And so the first boundary that we use would be the boundary of, is it wholesome? Is it worthwhile? Is it worthy of our attention? Or is it unwholesome, not worthwhile? Now, generally what that means is that a lot of the stuff that we used to think about, we're not going to think about anymore. We're going to start keeping the mind focused on, let us put it in the easy two ways of looking at it. We're going to keep the mind focused on the here now. We're also going to keep the mind focused on the Dhamma. And that we're going to continue to do that. Keeping it focused on the Dhamma and keeping it focused on the here now in relationship. So when instead of just talking about the Four Noble Truths, yes, there is suffering, and yes, there's a cause of suffering, we begin to see, oh, right now, this is suffering in the mind. I can see that. And so let's pull that stuff out, okay? And then we start looking for in deeper to see the causes of suffering. So basically the kind of thoughts that we're having now are thoughts about the here now that are focusing around the teachings of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, the way the mind works, talking to us about anapanasati, and also putting the kind of investigation into how am I doing? Is this really good sati? Is this really good investigation? Do I really feel good? How is my effort? And so we start investigating how our practice is in relationship to the Four Noble Truths and even the seven factors of enlightenment.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. So during that process, is your attention still on your breath as the kind of anchor point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I ask other questions?
Let me finish the answer to that.
All right.
But the anchor points are very, very short in time. The anchor point is actually going to be a point of sati with the long, deep in-breath. We're only going to note that it's a long, deep breath. So we don't have to continuously watch the breath. We're just making sure that it's a long, deep breath. And then another point of sati is on the out breath to make sure that it's a long, deep out breath. And so with that, we have plenty of more time then with the mind, because the mind's really fast. The Buddha says the mind is so fast that he doesn't even know an analogy for how fast the mind is. So during an in-breath and an out-breath, the mind is going to wander all over the place. And still you have the long, deep breath and the long out-breath. Well, we're not going to let it wander so much. We're going to start to corral it down. We're going to only allow wholesome thoughts and not let the mind wander all over the place. We're going to give it a closer boundary. And as we progress, we're going to shut that boundary down closer and closer. An example of that would be chanting. The chanta sutta means that now the monks are only thinking about just that sutta and the line that it goes. So now we've narrowed it down further. You can even the Christians would narrow it down to a prayer. And so they've got this prayer like the Lord's Prayer, and you repeat the Lord's Prayer over and over and over again. Now the next step down would be to focus the mind down to the point of, say, just a mantra. So you have bu on the in-breath and do on the out-breath, and that's the only thought that you're allowing the mind to have. Just bu on the in-breath and do on the out-breath, which means now you've got the mind very, very stable. It is not wandering around anywhere. Some people would call that word concentration, and I'll let them get away with it.
Yeah.
So the next thing that happens is that if we can get the mind down to just 2 words, then it's a whole lot easier to get it down to 0 words. So the next thing to do is to start working with the breath. So at the end of the out breath on the do, that you stop breathing and you stop thinking, and you don't let the mind have a bu until you have the next in breath. This is actually how you move out of the fruit of first jhana into the path of second jhana. So first jhana is the process of narrowing it down further and further and further and further until you get it down to just a couple of words.
Okay, I have a bunch of questions. So first, so with the first step of just only allowing wholesome breath, but only allowing wholesome thoughts, but having the breath as an anchor. So is that intentionally like, oh, I'm going to now investigate arising, dependent origination now. And so then for the rest of the sit, you do that? Or, oh, I'm only going to contemplate, or I'm only going to be aware of impermanence now. Is it like to what degree is it a cognitive thing? To what degree is it an intellectual thing?
I would say yes, for a beginner, that would be exactly the way to do it. except that in the course of the sitting meditation, he may make that choice 4, 5, or a dozen times. Now I'm going to look at impermanence. And he looks at impermanence for a while. And then he starts looking at other things. So that he begins to keep the mind in a tight circle that's associated with the Dhamma.
Yeah.
And that's the only, so he doesn't then let his mind wander away to the mall or to work or to the girlfriend or anything. We just keep it focused on how the mind is working, what it's doing in relationship to the Four Noble Truths. A really good example of that would be the third noble truth. And that is, this is it. This is the third noble truth. Wow, I am actually in this moment free from suffering. There is no suffering right now. That this is because that's quite a nice moment to recognize that the mind is steady, it's free, and the only thought that I've got right now is, wow, this is so nice.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, but during that whole time, you are aware of whether you're breathing in or whether you're breathing out, and that is the anchor. Okay.
Yes, that's the anchor.
Okay. So typically at the beginning of my sits, there's a little bit of a settling down period, in which case it does take a bit of, I usually kind of have a loose sort of grip on the breath just because I just let my mind do its thing until it kind of settles down, which seems to be this stage that you are talking about now. Except so rather than just being on the breath and kind of with a loose grip, like is what I do now, I'll kind of explicitly try to have a loose grip on the breath. I say loose, just be aware of whether it's in or out, and also be specifically aware of these different aspects of the Four Noble Truths. So this is going to be the initial stage. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense to me, and I can easily map this onto what I'm doing, which is even better. So, okay. Then after that, it calms down to a certain point. So usually at some point, it gets to the point where I don't lose track of the breath. So like, it doesn't mean my mind won't go somewhere, but it means that it won't be for long. I'll be aware of every in-breath when it's in and every out-breath of when it's out. So if it goes somewhere, it's for like a split second, and then I'm usually back.
Right. That's how we work it. That it goes away, but it always comes back. Another one that's kind of important as part of that anchor is to anchor yourself into sukha, or into the pleasure that has that quality that I mentioned before of that third noble truth of, wow, this is nice. It's a, oh, what a relief it is. It's like laying down in the bed and you say, ah.
So you're not just referring to the sukha that comes from piti. You're saying just pleasure in general of having calmness.
Right.
Okay.
They work together. If you do not have that ounce of piti, you will not get that gallon of sukha. You have to have a little of the piti, but the piti is not the important part. The piti is actually the knowledge of success.
Mm-hmm.
The knowledge that I can do this. The knowledge that no matter how obstructed the mind gets, I can come back to the breath and start again.
Okay. Okay, so then
that piti there, or that satisfaction, or that winner's mentality, then is the basis for the pleasure, the sukha.
Okay, so then when I get to the point in which I'm not losing the breath for longer than an in-breath or an out-breath, is that the time to start the Buddho?
It depends upon the intention. If the intention is to go into second jhana, then yes. But if the intention is insight, then I would say that you probably don't have to do this, or maybe even it would be a nice toy to play with. But that the original point that the Buddha was making is that it is the first jhana, not the second jhana, that is the path. The first jhana is when the mind is fit for work, when you can apply the mind to something and keep it there. Like, for instance, on impermanence, or upon the third noble truth, or upon the Four Noble Truths just in general.
Okay.
And another one would be focusing just on the thoughts that are associated around how good you feel.
Okay. So I've never heard you talk about the 3 characteristics. I don't know if that's just because it's from a different tradition or whether you, so.
No, maybe I haven't, but anicca, dukkha, anatta is a key part of the teaching. That in fact, one could go so far as to say that anicca is what gets our attention, or we notice. An example of that is on the white floor. If you have a tick that's just sitting there on the floor as a speck, that is not going to pick up any attention at all. But if that tick starts to crawl across the floor, then the movement is what you will notice. That the human eye picks up movement. Well, anicca is nothing but movement. Things are moving. All right. So if things are in fact in motion and are not stable, then they are subject to falling apart. For instance, if that tick is just sitting there, he's safe. But if he starts crawling across the floor and you see him, he's going to be dead pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in that regard, anicca means that things fall apart. That there is nothing that, if things move, then they're going to move to a place where whatever human functionality we thought it had deteriorates. Cars get old.
Yeah.
Laptops, they get hot and they fail. And we don't like it. That's where the suffering comes in. The dukkha is that we want things to be the same. We like it the way that it was, and now it's changing on us. There's a way of looking at it that's in the Pali. It says sabbe sankhara anicca. Sabbe sankhara Dhamma, dukkha, and then sabbe Dhamma anatta. Basically, this distinction between the Dhamma, which is everything, and the word sankhara is that things are put together, compounded things. You could go so far as to look at it as the distinction between a molecule and an atom. But we already know now, we didn't 100 years ago when they started thinking about atoms. Atoms in those days were atoms. They were atomic in the sense that they were not splittable. But now we know that, there's the electron and there's the nucleus, and the nucleus has protons and neutrons, and the protons and the neutrons have quarks inside. So things that are atomic are really not atomic, because they can be broken down into split. So back to that point, all Dhamma is everything. And nowhere in nature, nowhere in the universe, nowhere in the galaxies, nowhere in the cells, nowhere down at the level of particle physics is there a self anywhere. And if there is no inherent self in anything, then where is the dukkha? The dukkha is associated with the self, and a self that doesn't like the change.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is I can kind of split that first stage into investigating the three characteristics and dependent origination. Does that sound like a good kind of...
The three characteristics is, in fact, a lead-in into Paticca It's one of the preliminary teachings.
So just the way that I work, I'm trying to think of like a systematic way to approach this. And so I'm thinking that if in that initial stage of anchoring on the breath, every thought that comes, then I'm trying to better appreciate its impermanence. I'm trying to better appreciate its lack of essence. I'm trying to better appreciate the dukkha that it causes. Mm-hmm. And then for the dependent origination, it's trying to follow from the from the appearance to the the craving and the
All right, so let's talk about it like this then, that if everything is in flux, and that because everything is in flux, that means that nothing is permanent, nothing is perfect. The problem with perfection is that perfection can't change and remain perfect. Eventually, perfection changes enough to where it changes to being imperfect. So there's nothing really perfect about it. Everything is impermanent and unsatisfying on its own. You're satisfied with your laptop as long as it functions. But there's going to come a time when your laptop no longer functions. How are you going to feel about it?
Well, if I have another one, I'll be okay. But I get the point.
That's right. That's exactly right. Certainly. That means now that you are not that laptop. But if you've only got one laptop and that fails, oh, poor me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's a good point about that. So basically, the word in Pali is trilokana, and these three characteristics are built right in. You can see, even though anicca doesn't seem to fit into the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths, dukkha and anatta certainly do. And that we can understand that another way of looking at anicca is through ignorance. If things are always changing and we're not keeping track of all these changes, then that's ignorance, just pure and simple. Things change and we're not aware of they changing. That's ignorance.
Okay. But just a kind of clarifying question. So when I'm anchored to the breath, is it the case that suppose there is a thought in the background, then I'm kind of investigating this thought through the lens of the Dhamma? Am I understanding this correctly? So I'm not trying to like recite things. I'm trying to kind of see what arises in the mind and trying to witness the Dhamma. Is that an accurate? Okay.
Yes, that would be exactly the right way to say it. And if that thought that arises has nothing to do with the here now, and it has nothing to do with Dhamma, then you could classify that thought as an unwholesome thought, not worth having.
Mm-hmm.
We would investigate that and say, no, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about the argument that I had with Aunt Susie. I don't want to think about the email that I've got to write.
Yeah, and I guess at the same time try to be aware of dukkha that it's caused.
Right, exactly. That's the whole investigation of the dukkha, is to recognize my thoughts about the fight I had with Aunt Susie. That's causing me suffering right now. I'm dissatisfied with the argument that I had with her, especially if she won it.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking of all kinds of things I can tell her, hoping that I can win the argument back.
Yeah.
Better
Okay.
just to sit in peace rather than trying to solve a problem that really doesn't exist anymore. That Aunt Susie may have, in fact, forgotten all about it. The question
Okay.
is, can we forget all about it?
So, so I am interested in kind of investigating the jhana um, approach a bit, just because when I have done it before, so it won't be what you're calling jhana, but I've definitely gotten into certain absorption states that it's definitely the case that when I went back to normal meditation, it was super clear. And so I am interested in exploring that a bit more.
Okay. Well, let me put it to you this way. And I've talked to other students about this. There's videos about it, but let's do it by talking about it. There is a sutta where that is kind of unique in that it's only talking about the first jhana, not about all of them. That the first jhana has unique qualities to it that we need to look at. And the unique quality is that the first jhana needs to be developed with the skills so that you become skilled at going into the first jhana. The second part is that you become skilled at maintaining the first jhana. And then the third one is that you create the skill and develop the skill to come out of first jhana. The other jhanas don't have that. The reason for it is because that sustaining of the first jhana is where, in that state of sukha, we really learn to control the mind while it's still active. But in the higher jhanas, the mind is shut off, or the talking part of the mind is shut off. And therefore, when you go back to thinking again, it's not skilled anymore. So the likelihood of most students who are practicing the higher jhanas is when they come out of the jhana, they go all the way back to normal life.
So would you say that the first jhana is more relevant for daily practice, for non-sitting meditation, as you would call it?
Yes, exactly. Living. No one that I know, and I imagine that you are too, you're not interested in developing your jhana to the point that you're spending 9 years in a cave, or that you're spending 17 hours a day sitting in some obscure or maybe very famous meditation hall in Burma. You're not interested in living your life squatting all the time, that you want to actually live a life. Okay? If you actually wanted to live a life, then let's live the life that's worthwhile living and developing the mind so that you can go into these higher jhanas, but then you don't have the skill to come back to the first jhana and maintain it. In the first sutta that the Buddha gave, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first thing that he discussed was the middle path. Now, if we look at the middle path in an ordinary way, that's sort of like the distinction between self-flagellation and the brothel. Those are the two extremes that a lot of people look at from when they think about the middle path. But another way of looking at the middle path is that the higher jhanas have a certain amount of high-level bliss that's higher than satisfaction. It can be overwhelming and delightful, and that the students who are doing this get kind of attached to it. And so the Buddha calls this one who is in these jhana states is one who is in pleasant abiding. Now, that pleasant abiding can be a put down, or it can be a congratulation. But what happens then is that if we are learning to develop the first jhana so that we can go into it, then maybe part of the way of going into it would be when we come out of second jhana. And that whenever we are developing the skill of coming out of first jhana, we're not going to go back to the ordinary mind. Students who practice the first jhana and get into the first jhana, their getting out of it is always unskillful. Why? Because the hindrances come back. So we're starting to develop a mind state so that we can control the mind and to do what the mind wants to, what we want it to do, in the sense of applying the mind, keeping the mind focused on what we want it to be on. And that kind of mind, in fact, people can't even read a book if they can't do that. Mm-hmm. You know, because you've read books, and when you read them, you know you're reading them, and you know that every sentence, that you've got that sentence, and every paragraph, you know you've got it. You've also read a book where the mind is wandering away, and you get down to the bottom of the paragraph, and you start the next paragraph, and you don't have a clue about what your eyes just passed over. That's the ordinary mind. So what we're looking at is that in the second jhana, you can't read it all. Mm-hmm. In the ordinary mind state, the mind wandering, you can't read very well. But in that first jhana, where you can apply the mind and keep it focused and get the information out of what you're reading, this is what we're looking for. Because now, instead of reading a book, we're going to start reading our own mind. And so we need the mind to be active, but we need it to be controlled. So there's a so maybe a way of looking at it is that if you take a horse and strap it down with one rope after another, pounded it into the ground, very much like what happened with Lilliputians or whatever, Gulliver's Travels, you know, that they...
Oh, yeah. A little Lilliputians, yeah.
That's exactly what we do in jhana, is that we completely strap the mind down. Or the other possibility is that we take all the strappings off, all the ropes off, and now the mind, or in the case of a horse, it would go free. So we neither want to have the horse wild, nor do we want it completely strapped down. We want it free enough so that it can carry a rider and go where the rider wants it to go. Mm-hmm. So the thinking part of your mind in that regard is the horse, and the higher mind, or your frontal cortex, is the rider. So we're training a wild horse, and that wild horse is the thinking part of the mind. But we don't want to strap it down to the point that it is unuseful. It may be very pleasant to just lay there all strapped down. Wow, this is so nice, but you don't learn anything. You can't see anything. You can't get up and go anywhere without throwing the straps off and going wild again. What we want to be able to do is to train the mind with this first jhana so that we can think the thoughts that are wholesome and useful for thinking.
Okay, but then, so why were you mentioning Budo and the second jhana then? I mean, do you not see the utility? I mean, do you not see, I mean, to me, what I liked about doing jhana practice was the clarity that I had when I got out of the jhana. So, I mean, what about doing first jhana most of the time and then going to the second one and then coming back to the first one? Is that...
That's actually a very interesting argument, and I've been on both sides of that argument over the years.
Okay.
Is in fact all first jhana and no second jhana the right way to go? Or is it mostly first jhana and a little second jhana is the right way to go? And I would tend to believe on both sides of that. The other side is that first jhana is not enough. You've got to have second jhana. I used to be in that camp. Mm-hmm. And now I'm not in that camp anymore. I'm more back into the camp of you've really got to develop the first jhana and get really good at it. But part of the way of getting really good at first jhana is the ability to get the mind into second jhana, because that's the only way out of first jhana that's skillful.
So it's interesting to me for a few reasons. So one, because this is something I've thought a bit about, but not. So I know you don't get into the TMI stuff, but what you're calling first jhana is stage 4 in TMI. It's um, being able to not lose the breath, and so and this is like a really big This is like a really big point in practice when you get to the point that you can maintain the breath without losing it, and it's like a big milestone in that framework, and it's really interesting because it's it's a different it's very similar to what you're saying. The difference is that he doesn't talk about specifically having these wholesome thoughts. It's more just avoid getting drawn away by things, but it's a very similar type of thing. And what I did realize about my practice was that I could sometimes get up pretty high, but then exactly like what you're saying, I didn't feel like the foundation was strong enough, which is, it's awesome to hear you explaining it the exact way that I've started conceptualizing it, which is like, yeah, I could be up using their lingo in like stage 7 or something like that, but sometimes I'd be way down below. And what TMI people would typically say is, oh, that's just how practice is. You go up and you go down. But my intuition is that it would make more sense to try to make the foundation as stable as possible so that you can get back to that stage 4, or what you're talking about, first jhana, easily and consistently, rather than dropping below it sometimes and being way above it sometimes. So that's really cool that you're saying that, because this is exactly like what I have kind of intuitively come to start thinking about it.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. So now let's go back to this concept of the middle path. Rather than at the ordinary level of self-flagellation versus the problem of sensual desire, let's look at it from the position of the noble mind. So that one extreme would be the ordinary mind of hindrances. The other extreme would be the high jhanas, and that the middle path is in fact the first jhana. So being on the middle path means that you've got your mind fit for work. You're feeling a state of satisfaction and joy, the feeling of success, and I can do this. And so we want to maintain that state of mind kind of throughout our life, throughout the day, is to get into that kind of state and stay there. Now, we don't have to, in fact, be on the breath every breath, but that we are on every, let us say, every second or third breath is going to be a really deep, long one. That we don't let the mind wander away from the breath, but we do get kind of focused on, let us say, maybe the 5 aggregates. So let's go back a bit to the Trilokana, about the issue of anatta, because it has the quality of doubt. So long as people think that there is a self that needs to be protected, then we're looking for protection.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I just have to, I don't want to be rude, but I just have to text this back. Sorry. I didn't want to do it out of the side of my eye and not being paying attention, so hold on.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. So a lot of the students will start with the kind of questions of who am I? And the Buddha recommends don't do that. A much better way of doing it is through the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths, in the sense of not who am I, or how does excuse me, how does the I get created? But rather, what is the foundation? This is where we look at it, why the five aggregates are so valuable. The teaching of the five aggregates is that the structure of who you are, including your feelings and the body, and the mechanisms and workings of the mind, are not the self. Not the working mechanisms of the mind, but rather what the mind works out is what causes the suffering. In other words, the clinging that comes from the feelings. And so feelings of fear will give then rise to clinging to protection, getting angry, etc., like that. Now, in that regard, that's what creates the self, that which needs to be protected. If you are already in a state where you are secure, satisfied, successful, wealthy, generous, that kind of mentality, then you're going to be completely free from fear. If you have fear, then it's really, really difficult or impossible to feel safe. Safety and fear don't work together. So if you're afraid, what is the fear? The fear is actually the self-preservation instinct. So when fear comes up, that fear is to protect a self that really doesn't exist. It's imaginary. That kind of self doesn't exist, but we create it in the mind based on feelings and based upon the clinging that we have. And so the investigation of how that mechanism works, how the mind actually functions to get us either into suffering or learning how to avoid suffering is the actual work that needs to be done. And all of that investigation about how the mind works can be done in the first jhana, but it can't really be done very well in the second jhana because much of the functioning of the mind is already shut down in second jhana. And so we can't really do the investigation that needs to be investigated. Now, one of the points that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa makes that I think is so profound is that there's a point that we really need to start focus on and paying attention to. And that is the point where feelings arise. Feelings arise in the sense of I like it or I don't like it, or in a feeling of confusion. That feeling of liking and the feeling of not liking and the feeling of confusion when they're ignorant will cause the clinging.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Because if I like it, I want it. If I want it, I got to have it. And there it is. Who's the I then that's got to have it? The clinging requires a clingor. And that's where the self comes in. The self is that which clings. And is also the constructor for the suffering. So if there is a self, then suffering will come. If there is no self, then there is no dukkha. So you can think of the trilokana as kind of a Y-shaped or a fork in the road. And the fork or the base of the Y is anicca. And so you're just going along and all of a sudden something changed. Which direction are you going to go in? Are you going to go in the direction of self that suffers? Or are you going to go into the direction of no self and no suffering? The choice is yours. Where is that choice? That choice is right there at that point of contact. That's where the Y of the road is, which are the feelings that I have are going to be wise. In that case, there's no self. Are they going to be ignorant, which means we're going in the direction of clinging, which takes us into the suffering. And so the Trilokana is actually a very shorthand version of Paticca Samuppada.
Uh-huh. Okay, um, so I'm going to try the little bit of second jhana, majority first jhana. That's what I'm gonna.
All right. Yeah.
Just because.
And so that's the question then, okay, is developing the skill of coming out of first jhana means the skill of developing and going into the second jhana. That's where the Buddha is most useful
Mhm.
because now the mind is so sharp and focused and it is so corralled that you're now down to just one or two words.
So, are you no longer on the breath then, or are you?
No, the Bu is on the in breath and the Do is on the out breath.
So, what is your focus on? Is it on the breath itself? Is it on the word?
Actually, yes, but another way of saying it is that the focus zone is to make sure that the mind does not go anywhere other than these two words.
And you don't say it out loud, right? It's you say it in your head.
Right. You don't say it out loud.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
could you could vocalize it in the sense of oh, oh, like that. So you could vocalize it on the out breath. You don't vocalize things on the in breath anyway. Nobody does. It takes
Yeah.
a skill, by the way. You can learn to talk while taking in and breath that you sound really weird.
I agree. Um, okay. Yeah. Because I mean, it makes sense to me because a lot of the kind of when I'm when I'm able to stay on the breath, um, when there's background, it's often verbalization background. And I imagine that the Budo is actually probably quite effective at getting rid of a lot of the verbalization in the background.
Right, but it's not going to get rid of a lot of verbalization of the background. The Budo is going to get rid of the remnants of the background.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of the background noise is going to be eliminated by eliminating the unwholesome. Is to be on guard for the unwholesome.
Yeah, yeah. So what happens to me is like when I stop mind wandering, then I eventually get to this point in which so I usually use the breath sensation. So I'm just going to translate between TMI and what you're saying. So TMI, after you stay on the breath, would use the specific breath sensations to get what they call exclusive attention. So exclusive attention is like you really there's nothing is drawing your attention at all. So, but you're using Budo to do that instead. Um,
As
so
one, there's other things to do.
yeah, yeah, no, but I mean it's really fun for me to kind of like make these connections. So, because that to them is stage 7, which is another one of these big kind of progress things in that they call it exclusive attention. Um, yeah, but anyway, but for me, when I'm at the point of when I'm easily on the breath, I will have like little they aren't as they're just like fragments of thoughts sometimes. So it might be like just a random word coming out of nowhere or something like that. But in my particular case, most of that it's auditory in my head. It's not visual. It's for me, it tends to be little like fragments of words and stuff like that. And so it seems to me like the Budo might be especially good with that, um, just because it's also auditory.
Yes, exactly. Another way of working with it is also learning to, with your eyes closed, you're still looking with your eyes upon a black or blank field that may have some random firings and things like this. The reason I'm mentioning this is because this is a tool that we can use to make sure that there are no visual images coming up, that we actually are able to not only keep the vocalization down to a very, very small degree, we also limit the visualizations down, so that everything becomes really, really quiet. And this is the second jhana. But what it has, though, is the feelings that are still there. We haven't begun to tackle the feelings, really. But what we have instead of tackling them is we've learned to already control them, so that we control them that we feel good. This is part of the feeling for the first jhana that needs to be developed, is the feeling of satisfaction, the feeling of joy, the feeling of this is really, really nice. Mm-hmm. And we tell ourselves that, and we have that vocalization, and we can see ourselves as sitting very nice, and we like it. But then the second jhana is when we don't have to tell ourselves how good we feel anymore. We just sit there and feel really good.
Yeah.
And the Buddha can help do that in the sense of Buddha. And so we just kind of let the out breath out. And we've already been oxygenating the blood by breathing deeply. So at this point of the out breath, the blood oxygen is still very, very high. And so now we can hold that out breath for quite a long time, maybe 15 or 20 seconds. The question is can you also maintain the silence of the mind between that last do and the next boo, so that we begin to time the way that the mind starts up will be with the next in-breath. Then later, after we get good at being able to do this, of stopping the mind during the after the out-breath, later we'll begin to learn to take an in-breath without the mind starting back up again.
Okay.
That takes skill. Mm-hmm. Skill to be developed. The question is, how long can you keep it quiet? So how long is your out-breath going to last, or between the out-breath and the next in-breath? Let that be a long time, and your job, almost like it's a determination. You're determined not to let the mind start up again.
So you're not focusing on anything in particular at that point, or are you
focusing on keeping the mind quiet?
Okay, but like the Buddha, are you still focusing on the dough at that point, or is the dough gone and you're still?
The dough is gone.
So there's now no objective attention at that point. Okay.
That's what we're focusing on now, is keeping it quiet. Mm-hmm. Keeping the mind quiet, not allowing the thoughts to come back. Naturally, they will. This is a skill to be developed. Mm-hmm. Thinking your whole life, you think you're just going to stop doing it immediately? Nope, it's not going to happen. It takes skill. And the skill is basically first getting the breath as an anchor. That's the first thing that we do. And we keep coming back to the breath and coming back to the breath and coming back to the breath. After we get skilled at that, now when the mind wanders away, we're going to start watching where it goes, so that we're saying, no, we're not going to go there. We're going to only allow the mind to have wholesome thoughts. And then we're going to corral it down further than that in the sense of, I'm only going to think about the Eightfold Noble Path, or I'm only going to think about Paticca Samuppada for a while. And so we keep the mind focused very tightly. The next one would be down to maybe an example that many monks do is a line or two, or maybe a paragraph of Pali. Then they repeat that same phrase over and over and over again, that long phrase. But that's the only thing that you're thinking about. Christians would do it with a prayer. Let me see if I can think of an example of it. Over and over again, you would say, Anicca vata sankara upatava You say that over and over and over and over again. And that keeps the mind just focused, because you can see that now we've got 30 or 40 Pali words, but that's all we're going to say. And so we have to think about saying that correctly over and over and over and over again. That would be the step right before Buddha.
Okay.
Okay. And that phrase, anicca vata sankara upattavayu dhammano upajjatawa nero jante tesa vipassamo sukho. That end of it. Basically, this is a funeral chant. And that the last line that I just gave you, or the last part of it, is that death is the highest peace. Sukho, that's the last word. Did you catch that? The last word there is sukho.
Mm-hmm.
Nicca vata sankara upattavayu dhammano. It's a Jacob. I got lost it. Let me see if I can start it again. Anicca vata sankara upattavayu dhammano upajjatawa nero jante tesa vipassano sukho. The passage into sukha. That's death. All right, but we can see, but when you hear that word sukho, it's there. You are in it. You are completely in that sukho. All right. So we have that little mantra, but now it's a little paragraph or whatever. But keeping the mind focused only on that and only allowing that is now going to have the mind very, very narrowly focused. So that from here, another example that they use in some traditions is counting from 1 to 10 over and over again. And the students who are practicing that say that it's really hard to do because other thoughts will come from the numbers. We can go from 1 to 2 to 3, and between 2 and 3, I've had a thought or two. By the time I get to 6 or 7 now, I've got a lot of thoughts. And by the time I've gotten to 9, I didn't even get to 9 because the mind had wandered away completely. And so putting the mind in too tight a box, and it will escape.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is that we begin to tie the mind down gradually, succinctly, in the sense of the stages that we've talked about. One is just keep bringing the mind back. The next one is only allowing wholesome thoughts. The next one is to corral it into the Dhamma and only allow the here now and only allow wholesome thoughts. Then we get it down to a little song. In fact, you could use zippity doo dah, zippity a, oh my, oh my, what a wonderful day. And then you say it again. Zippity doo dah, zippity a, my oh my, what a wonderful day. And then again, zippity doo dah, zippity day, my oh my, what a wonderful day. And you just keep saying that over and over and over and over again. So that no other thoughts get in there. The only thing that you allow in there is that song.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're ready to go Buddha.
Okay, sounds good. I'll give it a shot.
All right.
No, I mean, like I said, so when I'm on retreat, I can get to pretty high states of stability of my mind. I would like to better bridge my off retreat from on retreat. And so, yeah, I think it is largely about building a better foundation in the sense of exactly like what you're saying. So, because like
Right.
I can get to the point where I don't really have distractions at all, and I can be in that sometimes if I'm lucky for a while, but then for whatever reason, if I get knocked out of it, then sometimes I'm just like floundering, and that still does happen sometimes, less than it used to, but I do think it's the case that I should have a better foundation, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's repeat that little foundation that we need. is to develop the skill for first jhana to go into the first jhana. How do we do that? With the gladdening the mind and telling ourselves how good we feel and telling ourselves that we're a winner here. And so those kind of thoughts that we have will place us into a state of sukha, and that's the quality of the first jhana. So we need to get into that state. The next one, which is the part that is, let us say, takes effort for perhaps months, and that is the effort to maintain this state. Because students fall in and out of first jhana all the time. There's no big deal. But maintaining it so that you maintain that state of sukha, that's the hard part. But once you get it maintained, that means that now you're keeping the mind very focused on only the wholesome things. And so you begin to narrow it down so that the next phase then is going to be the skill in leaving the first jhana. And falling back to ordinary mind is not a skill to be developed. That's an accident that's bound to happen. No, the skill of leaving first jhana is to go into second jhana. Mm-hmm. By systematically continuing to close the mind down further and further until you get it to where it's down to 2 words, and now you're ready to move into no words at all. Mm-hmm. So that's the sequence of events.
So is no words at all, you're seriously saying that that's still part of the second jhana?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the mind will start up. The question is, does it start up in going back into first jhana, that you're back into a state of delightful wholesomeness where you've got full control of the mind, or are you going to fall out of second jhana into ordinary mind full of hindrances?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. So most of pretty much all my practice is about the attention at the breath at the nostrils, those sensations. So rather than just knowing in or out and then a mantra, it's putting all of your attention onto those sensations. Is there a way to do what you're saying? So the Buddho, I like that a lot because it seems like it explicitly deals with little fragments of verbalization. So I'm definitely going to try that for that reason. It makes a lot of sense for me. But can I still try to have the attention on the breath of the nostrils? Just because
I would say this, that the breathing at the nostrils is only valuable once the mind gets down to that place where we can do Buddho.
Okay.
And part of the reason for that is because of the nimitta that is created, because you can feel that sensation after the out breath is out, and you're not breathing at all, and yet you can still sense that the touch of the breath as a nimitta. Okay. There was this afterglow after the breath is out. You can still feel that touch. So the Buddho and the keeping the mind focused at the nose tip are 2 aspects of the technique of moving from first jhana to second jhana.
Okay.
What we do in first jhana to develop the first jhana is not focus one pointed on the nose, but we keep it on the whole body of the breath, so that we can feel the touch of the cloth, we can feel the air on the arm, we can feel the tension in the neck, we can do all of that kind of stuff, and that we would do that through the development of the first jhana.
Yeah.
That in fact that's in fact the way that we would limit the mind and bring it down, would be by focusing on what's happening right now. Well, what is happening right now? Well, I'm holding my finger, and I can feel the wind on my leg, and so we begin to get very bodily oriented as we're developing this first jhana. Mm-hmm. Then after we've gotten that first jhana to where it's very, very stable, and that we've got the mind focused on a very, very small amount of stuff, then that's when we leave the body of breath and go for just the guarding of it. Now, one of the ways that we can do that as an intermediate is what they call chasing the breath. And the chasing of the breath is systematically moving the mind from the nose down to the belly on an in-breath, and then systematically bringing the awareness of the mind out on the out-breath, coming back to rest at the nose tip. So that then you're at the nose tip at the end of the out-breath before the new in-breath comes. And so you still have that movement that's associated with the first jhana.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and all the old masters will say, yeah, the first jhana is the place to get all of our insight and really figure things out. But it is still quite active. And that the second jhana then is when the mind really stills down. And there's these techniques that we can use to get the mind even more quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to be able to live your life like that.
Yeah.
That the foundation that you're going to have, or the safety net, or the normal way that you're going to live your life is in first jhana.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a ton of sense to me. So, okay, so I sit down, and then I use as an anchor my breath, not specifically breath in any part, just my breath. Mm-hmm. And I'm aware of when it's in and when it's out, when it's long, when it's not as long.
Mm-hmm.
So that's anchoring me. Outside of that, it's pretty much freestyle at first. I let it do what it wants. As long as I focus is the wrong word. As long as I stay anchored to that, I'm just going to let it be like that. Then eventually, I'm going to start cultivating only wholesome thoughts. And that is to say, any thoughts that aren't in the present moment at that time are not wholesome thoughts.
Okay.
Observations about impermanence and that kind of thing are wholesome thoughts because they're grounded in the reality of that moment and understanding the reality of that moment.
You got it. Exactly.
Then, if I want to, I can try for second jhana. Mm-hmm. If it's the case that I can sustain that first jhana for 20 minutes, for some period of time, if I get good at it, then I can try, just because that's the most important thing to work on, is the sustaining of the first jhana, because that's the most relevant one, and the one that can and the one that has activity that can then be understood, because when you shut down the activity, there's less to actually be understanding, so there's less insight to be had. So to get from the first to the second jhana, I can start focusing more on the sensations of the nose itself, as well as using bu-do, bu on the in-breath, do on the out-breath. Mm-hmm. And I can try on the out-breath, to try to elongate the out-breath such that there's a gap in thought. So the idea of bu-do is all of the attention should be absorbed at this point. None of it should be going to anything else. But obviously when I have an out-breath, at the end of that out-breath, there isn't anything to grab onto. And the idea is that's the point. The idea is that it should still be quiet even without that crutch.
Right.
Okay. No, I got it. I'll try that.
Go on guard. Now here's something that happens with every student. And that is that as soon as we recognize that the mind has in fact stopped, and that recognition that the mind has stopped gives a great deal of elation, a great deal of pity will arise at that point, that you are in fact successful. You've actually been able to stop the mind. And the yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay comes up, but that in fact pulls us back out of second jhana.
Mm-hmm.
So, that skill of leaving first jhana, going into second jhana, needs to be cultivated like that, so that when you leave the first jhana, you can actually get the mind quiet without getting too excited about the fact that you've gotten it quiet.
So
Because if you get excited about it getting quiet, it's not going to stay quiet. The excitement itself is pulling you back out of that quiet place.
No, trust me, I've experienced a ton of that. I'm an old pro at getting dragged off by being excited that so the way I understand this, the transition between first and second jhana, there's just like a bunch of tricks to do it, and it doesn't matter exactly which one that you use. Whether you're following this or that isn't really the point. Is that accurate?
Right. Exactly. The question for second jhana is, can you get the mind quiet and then begin to keep it that way longer and longer? But in the beginning, the first thing that's going to happen is you recognize that the mind has gotten quiet, and that's when it gets dragged out of it because you get excited that it's gotten quiet.
Yeah.
So now the next time that you do it, or a few times later, when you get into second jhana, you got to say, okay, I'm going to stay quiet. You don't have to. In fact, if you think that, you're already back out of second jhana. So there's something else that has to do it, so that once you recognize that you're in second jhana, now it's almost like literally holding your breath to make sure that the mind doesn't start back up again.
Okay, so then at some point, the Buddho isn't necessary anymore, and that gets discarded. Is that accurate?
Right. You can continue to use the Buddho to reinforce or keep going back into the second jhana, but what you could do then is, in the training of the second jhana, is you want to continue to use the Buddho, but when you can get to the point of being able to have the mind completely quiet and you can take an in-breath, you do not want to do Bu on that next in-breath, because that's going to take the mind starting up again, and you've already gotten it quiet. So yes, the answer to that is you do not, once you're in second jhana, to continue Buddho, because that's going to take you back onto that cusp or that border between first and second jhana.
Okay, so then I have another question. So you drop Buddho. Can you still have attention on breath sensations?
Yes, but it is delicious because you're not thinking about it. You're just in full feeling. And remember, part of the first jhana was getting yourself into a state of sukha, or satisfaction, and piti. So this is where the piti, or the feelings, the really, really good feelings. The question is, how good can you feel in first jhana is almost double in the second jhana. How good can you feel when you're not even thinking? That the feelings just overwhelm. It's just like, oh. They're overwhelming. That's why the analogy of the artesian well at the bottom of a lake is because it's just, ooh, the feelings just, you feel really good.
Yeah. Okay.
And those really good feelings, you have to develop those good feelings so that they don't too also pull you out of the second jhana.
Yes.
So that you don't even talk about these good feelings, you just experience them.
Yeah, no, so I've gotten here on retreat. This is the only time I've gotten to that point. But okay. Okay, great. So basically the Buddho.
Now that you've done that, you know what it's like. You can go do it again. You've already gotten some skill.
Not consistently is the issue. That's
No, not consistently, but you've been there. You've done that. You know what it is. You can do it again. You know you can do it again.
No, I know. I would like to be able to, like I said, more consistency. That's kind of my aim right now. And not even so much with that, but just for everything, just a stronger foundation, I think, for everything, rather than just being able to get to certain points sometimes, being able to have a stable base on it. I think that makes sense, that should be my goal. But the Buddho is like a temporary it's like a, I don't want to say crutch, but like it's like training wheels sort of. Um,
It's like it's a
okay.
mantra. It really is.
And
It's
then
a
you get
way of focusing the mind down to where you're not thinking about anything else other than that mantra. And when you get the mind that tight, then you throw the mantra out too. That's the
and
easy way to say it, not so easy to do.
but even when the mantra is gone, I can have attention on the breath sensations.
Yes, continuing on not just the breath sensations, but now because the mind is not thinking, you've got a whole lot of stuff to experience.
Yeah.
The body, the feelings,
Yeah.
all of that is associated because now then the mind is stopped. That's not the third jhana because the third jhana is to be able to come out of those feelings. The lotus flower will come out of the pond or it'll come out of the fast flowing brook. So the third jhana is the coming out of the overwhelming good feelings that you have developed in the second jhana.
Okay. So I've never gotten there. So um, just as the a translation, so TMI would call that stage 9 then. And the idea is they call it the pacification of something or other, but the idea is the PT kind of, it's less, it goes down and everything becomes just calm and joyful. And that and so
Right.
that so that's what they would call the ninth stage. Okay, that's this is very cool to me to see these things link up like this. Cool. Um, but
These list of numbers that you got was taken out of, I think, the third or fourth century AD, which meant that the original stuff that I'm teaching, they just put numbers to it,
yeah,
and that was done way back when. So it's not a matter of putting things together; they were already together. I guess putting things together in your own mind would be
that's
the right.
that's all that matters to me. um,
Yeah,
no,
there's
but
really just one. And see, this is part going back to what we were talking about earlier. This is one of the values of having more than one teacher, is
yeah.
because you get more than one angle at what's happening.
No, I mean, I've told you and Tucker both, it's been super helpful for me to have two perspectives on things. Um, yeah, super helpful. Um, so, okay, no, this is great. So I think I'm going to try this approach rather than the TMI for a while. I mean, it's like I said, it's very similar in a lot of ways, but there are some distinctions. And so, I mean, Budo, I've not really tried, and I've not explicitly had this period of just only allowing wholesome thoughts. I have explored dependent arising or dependent origination before, but not quite this way. So yeah, I'll try that. That sounds fun.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Well, let's go ahead and finish now, and we'll hope to see you soon. And you can we can continue on with this discussion. But I think you're really getting a pretty good foundation about what this is. And you can begin to see that once we begin to figure out, it's really not that much to it. It's really not a whole fat book full of stuff to do.
Well, so this is the interesting thing. So TMI, the reason I was originally drawn toward it is how precise it is. But I think now that I have enough kind of maybe just technical knowledge of things, it's easier for me just to let go and be less, just be more simple about it. I think that the TMI has helped a lot, but yeah, I feel like more and more I'm drawn toward more simple instructions for sure. But
All right, we'll see you later then.
all right, sounds good.
Okay, bye bye.
All right, bye bye. Thank you.